Good evening, everybody. Brian Neubert here from GoldandBlack.com, live with our Twin Cities Bureau, Tom Dienhart, here for our Saturday Simulcast following Purdue's 20-10 upset win over Minnesota. Thank you to our good friends at the Purdue Union Club Hotel for your continued support, home of the Boiler Up Bar and the 811 Bistro. We will jump right into it. Purdue goes up to Minnesota after a very lackluster first four games of the season, all told. They were, in some circles, a double-digit underdog. Minnesota has had their number here the last couple of years, but Tom, as the old folks say, it kind of goes to show you never can tell, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of one word that would really sum up today's proceedings. Maybe resourceful. Pretty found a way, Brian. It wasn't pretty for a second week in a row. Now the offense really just struggled to do much of anything, especially from a big play standpoint. For most of the game, Minnesota sat back in that too deep shell, and they were not going to get beat by the long pass. And sure enough, Purdue's longest catch was that 28-yarder, I think Charlie Jones had, which was a huge catch.
Yeah.
Set up that field goal by Mitchell Finneran. But, Purdue took its shots running the football. I thought they were pretty patient. If you look at the final numbers, running the ball, they're pretty good for Purdue. By the way, Brian, this is now 2 weeks in a row Purdue's had a walk-on running back rush for over 100 yards. So there you go. And the Minnesota defense, like I said, wasn't going to get beat deep. And Purdue was patient. It got real sluggish during the second and third quarters. I kind of thought at some time, Brian, I don't know what you thought. If you ever thought maybe why not have a quarterback switch? I didn't know if Aidan O'Connell was 100%. He didn't look 100% to me, but by the way he was throwing the football. And, again, the offense was sluggish. Minnesota was begging to get beat. But you always wondered, was Purdue going to find a way to make plays to win the game? And come crunch time, they did on both sides of the ball, Brian. So, again, there's a lot of nits you can pick about Purdue, but they found a way to win. They're 3-2 overall, 1-1 in the Big Ten. Going to Maryland with a chance to add to their resume and sort of obviously work on some of those flaws that we all saw that were apparent today.
Yeah, I just thought that this was kind of the same script kind of unfolding. I thought the offense was, again, sort of leaving the defense hung out to dry. I don't think you could ask any more from that defense than what you got today. It was just an exceptional game from that group. But they did just enough. It was the opposite of the games before, whereas you didn't have answers at the end of games, and now suddenly you did, because all 10 of Purdue's second half points came on their final two drives, and they just made the plays at the end that they weren't able to make against Penn State and they weren't able to make against Syracuse. And I just think that that's a really positive sign, for Purdue. I think that, I think we'd be remiss to not mention the fact Minnesota was down a couple of big offensive pieces. But just the way that defense played, the defensive line, I thought was really good. You saw a lot of really big time individual plays from guys like Jack Sullivan on the interception he forced. Corday Sidnor made a really nice play, kind of coming off a block on the edge to get a tackle for loss, and they just did a good job. Hydran Jenkins, as a pass rusher, made a big play for a strip sack that ended up being a gain for Minnesota. I just thought they were really active in their front. I liked their pre-snap movement. I thought maybe that probably helped them a little bit. I thought the linebackers played well, and that was a huge question coming into this, because this was a different style of play from what Purdue has faced in the first four games. The secondary, the much maligned secondary. Corey Trice looked like a all Big Ten player today.
Yeah.
Biggest defensive play of the game, probably, or the second biggest defensive play of the game, not counting Cam Allen's interception that fell in his lap in the end zone, was that breakup by Bryce Hampton on that third down. That's the same Bryce Hampton that on Monday Jeff Brom intimated was behind Brandon Callaway, who hasn't really played yet at corner. That was everybody who had a chance to make a play today did. Cam Allen caught the interceptions that were thrown to him. There were a lot of big time breakups and just a really good all around performance from that Purdue defense. From the players, the coaches did a great job this week. It sure seemed like the tackling was better, with the exception of that one big play. What did you kind of see from that defense relative to what you'd seen?
Yeah, you're right.
The first month. What really changed, do you think?
Well, I mean, Jeff Brom was asked obviously about that defensive effort in the post game, and he said, Brian, that they did a little bit of disguising things, what they're trying to do. He said they had a solid base defense. And the bottom line was they wanted to try to create some confusion for that Minnesota offense.
Yeah.
And you did think, Brian, you didn't mention specifically, you thought they did tackle better and they did keep the ball in front of them. There weren't, I can look at the stats. Minnesota, I don't think had very many real big plays. They had that 66-yard catch they had, but again, Sanusi Kane missed a tackle on that, and Reese Taylor wasn't really aware. I don't want to take anything away from Minnesota, but Purdue really was its own worst enemy on that long pass that the Gophers were able to strike on. But again, the longest run for the Gophers, Brian, was just 9 yards. And again, I talked about that pass. It went for 66 yards, a couple other 28-yarders. So Purdue did a good job in limiting the big plays. Tanner Morgan, Brian, the famed Purdue killer, was 18 of 33 today for 257 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 picks. Only 55% of his passes.
He was bad.
Yeah,
he was bad.
Yeah, you got to credit Ron English and that defense. Jeff Brom said they spent a lot of time this week working on stuff. Ron English had thought maybe he'd been too aggressive in some of these earlier games, Brian. You still want to pick your shots. You mentioned some of the Purdue personnel that stood out. I'm happy for Bryce Hampton, right? That's the kid who gave up the winning touchdown pass at Syracuse. Didn't play a snap last week. And like you said, Jeff Brom intimated he was behind Brandon Callaway at the presser this week. So good for Bryce Hampton. Reese Taylor got back on the field to provide some cornerback relief to Jamari Brown and to Corey Trice, too. And up front, Branson, Dean Corday Sidner, Kydron Jenkins, Jack Sullivan, that famed depth Mark Hagan always talks about, Brian. That was on full display today, and it really paid off. Help keeping some heat on the Gophers. And like you said, let's not forget, I'm not diminishing anything Purdue did, but not having number 24, Mo Ibrahim, was a big deal for the Gophers, obviously. And a couple of weeks ago, they lost their best wide receiver for the season to an injury in Chris Altman-Bell. But again, I'm not diminishing anything Purdue did today. Great win. To come up here as a double-digit underdog, Brian, to win this ball game really resets the deck and the stack for Purdue, and I think has to make them feel very good about themselves as they move forward here in this, what I think is a make-or-break October.
I thought it was really clutch defense by Purdue, because I thought you got to a point there in the second half where it looked like you just kind of felt like Minnesota was eventually going to break one in the running game. Maybe not a touchdown, but one of those 25 to 30-yard runs that all of a sudden flips the field and kind of puts Purdue back on its heels. But Purdue never let it happen, because every time they got Minnesota in third down, they came up with a huge stop. And I think that's kind of one of the stories of this game. One of the broad themes for Purdue is when Purdue needed to do something on either side of the ball, they did it. And that's the opposite of what we saw through the first 4 games of the season. Now, obviously, they won the FAU game by making the stops they needed, by scoring when they needed to. But Penn State, Syracuse, that's the great thing about college football, is that every game's kind of a season unto itself. And just when you think you know what's going to happen, something else happens. A huge key to this game, I think, and I'm going to keep beating this drum, is when you're playing somebody like Minnesota and you score early. That was an exceptional drive by the offense to start the game. When they get that touchdown on the board early, do you think PJ Fleck goes for that insane 4th down in his own territory if Purdue's not up 7-0? If that's a 0-0 game, do you think he does that?
I don't think so. I think the combination of being behind, playing at home, thinking you have some momentum, it's homecoming, and I think he probably regrets making that decision. I think Purdue got a field goal on that drive.
They did.
And Brian, this game really unfolded as Purdue would have wanted, right? They couldn't have scripted better themselves. They got a lead, right? And they never trailed this ball game. It got tied up, obviously, at 10-10, but it was perfect. They were able to play with that lead. They just never were really able to add to it throughout the course of the game. And you talked about the way the offense and the defense both delivered in crunch time in the fourth quarter, right? You had the interception that was key. No, actually, let me think, Brian, real back to the sequence here. Now, Purdue had forced a 3-and-out, I think, after they'd taken a lead. And then I think on the next drive was when Mockobee had the long run and then went in for the touchdown that made it 20-10. So it was just nice to see the defense and the offense both sort of, like I said, make big plays in crunch time in the fourth quarter to help seal this game and put it away.
Yeah, it's just so important when you score early because it influences the way the game unfolds. And, every point mattered here, as it always does. Obviously, the final score is 20-10, but Purdue's not in the position to put up that last touchdown if they don't have, some of those opportunities. Taking the 7 points off the board from Minnesota, albeit that was Minnesota's fault. That was just dumb luck that Minnesota, gets viciously attacked in the chest by a touchdown pass, and Cam Allen's able to just basically get the easiest interception of the year. That was just all the weird stuff went Purdue's way this year, it feels like. Whereas, the weird stuff has been really happening for Minnesota. When you look at weather stuff, when you look at the offensive pass interference, when you look at Elijah Sindelar and Rondell Moore getting hurt on the same play, it was encouraging from Purdue's perspective, I think, to get a little bit of luck in this one. They miss like a 25-yard field goal. They get called for a personal foul that keeps Purdue on the field. They drop a touchdown that results in a turnover. Sometimes you got to make your own breaks, and Purdue did get a lot of breaks today, and I'm sure that's something that was a really cathartic feeling for them because, they have been on the wrong side of some bad breaks here through the first month of the season. Some of them are their own fault, but it has to be just an over-the-moon type of feeling for Purdue flying back from Minnesota to have won this game, to have beaten Minnesota Big Ten style. As I keep saying over and over again, sometimes Purdue just needs to be solid. Don't beat itself. It's what they did today. They kind of sat back, did what they needed to do, and let Minnesota be the one to screw up. And just that kind of role reversal was a really, really positive thing for Purdue to see. I think Purdue still needs to score more. I think, you started off 10-0 pretty early in the game. Then you don't score in the second quarter, and you don't score in the third quarter, and then you don't score until there's like 5 minutes left on that big kick by Mitchell Finneran, who we haven't talked about yet. Yeah. He had missed a couple of kicks. He probably started to worry a little bit about his confidence. Comes up really big again today. But how do you think the offense evens this out and, puts a full 60 minutes together of productivity?
Yeah, real quick, that big sequence I was referring to, Brian, Finneran kicked the 25-yard field goal to make it 13-10. Then Purdue forced a 3-and-out, and they got the ball back, and that's when Mockobee had the big run to set up his own touchdown run. Yeah. Then Minnesota was picked off by Cam Allen for his second INT of the game. So just a big sequence there where the offense and the defense both stepped up.
Right.
How do they even it all out? I think hopefully Aidan O'Connell continues to get healthier and healthier because, like I said, I don't think he's 100%.
No, I don't.
And we saw how he looks. We know what he looks like when he's full go, right? The Penn State and Syracuse game. I know he got hurt against Syracuse, but still played through for over 400 yards. So you got to get him back to that type of mode where he's dialed in and throwing for 300-400 yards a game. And it's certainly, I know the offense is still functioning at a high level in some regards these first 4 or 5 games, but that number 2 target, Brian, still really has not emerged for Purdue, right? We all know about Charlie Jones, but, TJ Sheffield, Deion Burks, nobody else has really stepped up to be that complement to Charlie Jones. I think that would give this offense a whole nother dimension when you sprinkle in Payne Durham. And now some of the ability in the backfield that Devin Mockobee's providing from a big play standpoint. So I think that's what Purdue has to hope for is Aidan O'Connell can get healthy. I asked Jeff Rom after the game, is Aidan okay? Any idea if he's going to be ready for next week? And, they'll see where he's at. He didn't make one statement for or against his availability next week, but he said they had him all padded up and they think he came out okay, but obviously they'll evaluate everybody when they get back to West Lafayette. You think he's going to be ready. And like I said, hopefully he gets healthier and healthier here and gets that form he had earlier this season to make that offense as effective as we all know it can be.
Did he get hit today? I don't remember him taking any really big shots. That's a really positive thing.
He was sacked a couple times, I know, but I don't remember him getting drilled. He took off running a couple times.
That was a big play. That third down conversion he made with his legs. That was a huge play.
That was big. So yeah. But I don't think he ever got drilled. He looked good talking to him in the post game, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, you think he came out of this thing, with all his wits about him and healthy as well. So, like I said, we can check with Jeff Brom on Monday for sure after they get back, evaluate everybody and watch some film. So that's the big one, is just getting him right.
Yeah. So this Devin Mockobee character, I've been trying to I don't know if I'm trying to, but I've been sort of taking a wait and see kind of deal.
Yeah.
Just to see if it translates to a higher level of competition, see if it translates to, week 4, week 5, week 6, when people know who he is and when, he's played a couple games, taken some hits and things like that. Jeez, I mean, it's that last run, he looked like Eddie George or something. I'm obviously exaggerating, but that's a big time run. That was an unbelievable cut he made.
Remember,
they found something here. It seems like. I don't want to go out and say here that he's all of a sudden going to become Michael Bennett or Ron Dane or Carlos Hyde or all these random running backs are now dancing in my head. But damn, he was good.
That's a deep cut, Brian. I call that a deep cut in the business. Yeah, he was good. He had another nice run earlier in the game too. The coaches always talk about his shiftiness, how he's slippery. Jeff Brom called him fearless.
Yeah.
I think we all can attest to that. It's still not a real big guy, Brian. 190, but if you stand next to him, his upper body's not really developed. So they're hopeful to get him a little bit heavier and stronger, obviously, moving forward here. But quite a find right now. And, yeah, those final numbers, Brian, going to look good if you had Devin Mockobee in your fantasy league. 11 carries, 112 yards, a cool 10.2 yards per carry. Of course, he had the touchdown, too. Brian, Purdue ran for 160 yards on 27 carries.
Yeah.
The average almost 6 yards a tote. So, and, you look at Aidan O'Connell's numbers, 27 of 40, 199, a couple picks, no touchdowns. Not great. Like I said, it just didn't look like he was really driving the ball. He had some really poor throws, especially on one of the interceptions where he overthrew TJ Sheffield. So, again, that's just my observation from 10,000 feet at the game. It's hard to really catch everything, but didn't look like he was totally dialed in. But they won, Brian, off to Maryland. And I asked Coach Brom after the game, I asked Aidan O'Connell just to have some fun. Why not Purdue? Can you guys win the Big Ten West? And Aidan didn't shy away from it. He thinks they can. And I'm sure all the viewers are watching Big Ten games as this is being taped. And they know the zaniness that's going on, who's lost, who's won. And Brian, that Big Ten West is as wide open as ever here as we get deeper into October.
Yeah. I know you just took us toward Maryland, but I'm going to keep talking about Devin Mockobee, damn it. I think he can get better too. I mean, I think that, he still runs kind of upright. He still has a very kind of over-caffeinated running style that I think, there are some things technically, there are some things technique-wise. I think he can probably shore up a little bit and improve. I think he's a true freshman, right?
Redshirt.
Oh, he's a redshirt freshman. Okay. He's still a young guy. He's still going to get bigger, stronger, faster as he gets in a weight program. If hopefully they can keep him healthy. I'd like to see them throw the ball to the running backs more. I think that was a big thing that they did today. That was effective. I thought Jeff Brom did a good job taking what Minnesota was daring Purdue to do. Purdue Minnesota obviously wanted to take away the deep balls, try to make Purdue hit the ball over the middle a little bit, and when everybody drops, you run the ball. So they were basically saying, we don't think you can beat us with the running game, and Jeff Brom said, hold my
tab.
I don't want to say beer because I don't want to suggest that he's engaging in any sort of conduct that he shouldn't be engaging in. But I think he did a good job being disciplined in his play calling and not getting impatient and trying to force the ball down the field. Like I think all of his natural instincts would suggest he wants to as a play caller. But I think I think Devin Mockobee has been kind of a revelation for this team. Does it translate to Maryland now? I mean, consistency has been a thing for Purdue over the years here where you have one great game and then you come back the next week and you're not so hot. And then you go beat Ohio State, and then a couple weeks later you go up to Minnesota and you get your doors blown off. What do you expect to see next week? Do you think this is an enduring course correction here by Purdue, or do you think this was just their day?
Yeah, I thought given the veteran nature of this team when the season began, Brian, I thought they would be largely immune maybe to the roller coaster tumult that younger teams, less experienced teams can often experience. But we've seen some of that already. So I'll be honest with you, I really have no idea. I think maybe sometimes going back on the road in this instance may be a good thing instead of coming home and they're going to get pats on the back and accolades, but they got to go right back on the road. And you can have that different type of circle the wagons mentality, if you will, when you're on the road. And then probably will be an underdog again. And again, coming off a win like this, maybe that's what you need if you're Purdue to keep you grounded a little bit. To go back on the road and play a Maryland team that's been pretty good this year, Brian. One of Michael Loxley's better teams, it looks like. They got a great quarterback, too. So, again, having said all that, I think, again, maybe there won't be that wild swing in performance that sometimes have been trademarks of Jeff Brom's teams because of the circumstance of going back on the road. So it's going to be a big noon kick Eastern time in College Park. We'll see what the Boilers got, and where opportunities laying right at their feet here if they can keep the momentum going.
Yeah, I just thought Purdue looked like a more mature team today than they did the first month of the season. They didn't really do a whole lot to beat themselves. I know they overcame 3 turnovers, which is pretty hard to do, but I didn't think they beat themselves. That there weren't a lot of penalties. There was an offensive pass interference call that was harmful. There were a couple of first down penalties that set them back, but it wasn't discipline stuff. It wasn't roughness around the edges stuff. And I just think Purdue looked like it knew much more today about what it takes to win, as opposed to what you saw against, Syracuse and Penn State and all that stuff. And even to a lesser extent, Florida Atlantic, even though they did win that game. So I do think maybe this was a turning point for Purdue. And hey, the Big Ten West is what you said before. It's, Brett Bielema just pulled the ultimate troll job in Madison today, and Purdue goes up to Minnesota when Minnesota looks like they're on top of the world, and Iowa, actually scored today, and it just looks like a wide open division. Northwestern's not good. Nebraska's a mess, longing for the days of Adrian Martinez as he tears up everybody for Kansas State. The good news about Illinois is they've already lost to Indiana, remember? So they've already got a loss. I'm not saying they're going to be in a position where that matters in a couple weeks, but I'm just saying it's the team that dominated Wisconsin today has already lost to Indiana. So it's a dart throw, right?
I thought about that going down the elevator. I said, oh, my God, we were going over the Big Ten West, Big Ten teams in the Big Ten West, their records. Oh, my God, Illinois lost to Indiana. That's right.
Yeah.
And, Brian, kind of on that same vein, Jeff Brom was talking in the postgame about the schedule they've had to play to date. Penn State, Syracuse. I know Indiana State's nothing great, or Florida Atlantic, but the point being that they've been tested, right? They've had their fair share of adversity. And you kind of contrasted that with maybe playing cream puffs, starting to feel good about yourself, patting yourself on the back. You don't really have growth as a team when you're in those games. That's fun for fans, right? Shake their pom-poms and beat somebody 50-0, but you don't really learn anything about your team. And Jeff Brom's team has already, skinned its knees and been forced to look itself in the mirror and try to figure some things out. And it's a painful process. Nobody wants to lose and do that. But this seemed to be maybe one of those games where, Brian, those early season losses, as tough as they were, Purdue's had to hunker down and really look at itself, like I said, and you start making corrections. You have to be resourceful. And I thought that was an interesting point that he talked about today.
Yeah, and I said that after the Penn State game, and I think the opening line of my column was Purdue's going to be fine. Yeah. And I took a lot of what for that, but this is what I meant. Like, playing Penn State right out of the gate, it makes you better. Yep. It didn't show up at Syracuse as much. didn't necessarily show up against Florida Atlantic. But I think the other part of this is like, look who they don't have right now too. I mean, there's a lot of guys who would be really helping them who are not playing too. That's part of the adversity you talked about. So that's what also makes this an even more impressive win, because Jalen Graham would have made all the difference in the world against an offense like this. And they didn't need him because they played as good a game defensively as Purdue's played in years, I think. They shut out Boston College years ago, but Boston College couldn't throw the ball. I think they shut Boston College out. It doesn't matter. They just shut somebody out a couple weeks ago, but that's Indiana State.
They didn't handle it.
Anyway, Purdue's playing without some real assets here, and I think that's another part of it. Again, I want to mention that Minnesota's playing without some assets here today too. That should not be overlooked in all of this, but it also shouldn't take anything away from what Purdue did, because this was a hell of a win for Purdue, and I think that Purdue just kind of has to carry it forward now. And Tom, we have talked too long.
Hey, real quick. You mentioned Mitchell Finneran earlier. Quick hat tip to Mitchell for delivering today, right? 43-yarder, 25-yarder. It's got to please everybody on that sideline to know old number 24 looks like he's dialed back in.
Okay. Well, Tom, I know you have ice fishing to get back to.
I do.
What time's your flight tomorrow?
Speaking from you from the Bernie Bierman suite, I think. This is where Bernie Bierman probably would have watched games if he was alive today.
That's the most Minnesota name I've ever heard.
That's a deep cut. I got.
What time's your flight tomorrow?
6:20.
You're a sick man. All right. I wish you safe passage back to the land of only a few lakes. So take off, you hoser. Okay.
Will do. Great white.
Thank you to the Purdue Union Club Hotel for your support. We appreciate it very much, and we will talk to you guys again next weekend when Tom is in College Park, Maryland, with crab cake all over his face.
Any other Maryland stereotypes you want to work in?
There's a big time bagel place there on Maryland's campus. If you're into bagels, it's called it's creatively named College Park Bagels, I think. Yeah. It's right there on the corner. It's a pain in the ass to park at because they have this really weird parking lot, but there's a Target right by it. You can park outside the Target and walk over.
Like College Park. It's a neat
there
campus.
You go. Hey, College Park Bagels, if you want to sponsor our podcast.
We'll lead them while we're taping.
We are getting silly here. So thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you for everything. Have a good night.
Got it?
Hang on one second.